ads all the time about asbestos and mesothelioma. I know you see those. And you know what? We have got, in my opinion, the top attorney when it comes to representing these type of clients. We ask you every show, if you've got a question, please send it in. And I got to tell you, this month we got about 30 questions in. I know there's no way we'll get to all of them, but I am so lucky we have the best of the best, Michael Mendelbrot, attorney. Good afternoon, Michael.
Stephen, what an introduction. Thank you. And I really appreciate it as always. And I also appreciate you saying that it's not just a show about legal information, it's a show about helping people because to all the listeners out there, you've probably been around asbestos. If you've been in any old buildings, you may live in old homes and you may have some questions. So hopefully by tuning in and listening in, we'll get some questions where we can answer your questions and hopefully help and assist people, not just those diagnosed with asbestos diseases and mesothelioma. I have been representing victims of mesothelioma now and all asbestos diseases for over 30 years. So I am very familiar with the laws throughout the country, asbestos exposures, asbestos diseases, state-of-the-art information, medicine. So any questions you've got, I'm happy to answer.
Michael, I got to tell you, first of all, we do about 30 different types of shows a month. Your show, for some reason, attracts, I guess you would call them competitors, other law firms that say they handle mesothelioma and asbestos. But we have just last week, I received a call from an attorney, I believe he was out of Oakland, that does mesothelioma. But the reason why I bring this up is the three law firms, one was a big firm in Baltimore, uh, listened to your show and they liked it so much that they wanted a show just like it. Michael is he's exclusive to this, but to have competitors call up who listen to your show and want to do a show like that, usually they put you down. Hey, they're giving bad information out. But Michael, with your show, it just blows me away how complimentary they are.
Well, I can appreciate that. I think we are sort of a niche group of lawyers who are dedicated, hopefully, to the same victims of asbestos diseases. What makes me different from these, definitely the firm from Oakland, because I know who you're speaking of, as
Oh,
well as um, potentially the firm from Baltimore, because I also
big.
believe I know who you're speaking of, because I know all these firms. Um,
Have anything
we
to do with
represent.
baseball, Michael? Anything to do with baseball?
Well, I'm gonna hold on. I'll tell you about the firm that I think it is from Baltimore in a second.
Okay.
They also own the Baltimore Orioles, I believe, that or
Yes.
formerly did that firm,
Yes.
the Angelos Law Firm. So,
Yeah.
um, the Angelos Law Firm, like me, they also, but unlike the firm from Oakland, we still want to help victims of all asbestos diseases. You only see the commercials on TV, typically in magazines, newspapers, for mesothelioma cases. Those are great asbestos cases. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have 100 mesothelioma cases, but that also means that 100 of my clients are going to pass away from asbestos diseases. More challenging cases for lawyers like me are lung cancer and asbestosis cases, where we also have to prove that those diseases were caused by exposure to asbestos. A lot of firms don't take those challenging cases anymore. And that's why all of the advertising is for mesothelioma cases. Unfortunately, most of those firms are committed only to these most valuable cases as opposed to all victims of asbestos diseases, where we are committed to victims of any asbestos disease. I will investigate any case, as we always do, on a contingency, essentially for free. And
Yes.
and we also, unlike many other firms, give VA disability assistance. A lot of our clients were in the military, and outside of their asbestos legal benefits that we can potentially get them, they may also be entitled to governmental benefits, VA disability benefits, where we don't make any money from that, but we will always assist clients in filing those claims.
Michael, one of the things that I really love about your firm is I've noticed that these firms that advertise mesothelioma, they also do personal injury, and some of them even have other areas of law they practice. This is the only area you practice in.
Yeah, hopefully I'm not cutting out here, Steve, because you were a little choppy
No,
there. You can hear me
okay,
fine? Yeah, I just want to
I
make
hear
sure.
you.
Great. Yeah, we are dedicated solely and exclusively to victims of asbestos diseases. For all of these, or most of these other firms, you're going to see wrongful death, catastrophic
Yes,
injury cases, personal injury, car
brain
accidents.
injury,
That
brain injuries.
That's not us. And those are valuable cases, but you can't specialize in all of these areas. If you're a lawyer, to me, you're just casting, a hook for just any valuable case that will call you in that situation. And you may not be serving your clients properly because you always want the best results for your clients. And I'm not the best. Car accident lawyer or wrongful death, catastrophic brain injury lawyer. There are much better lawyers who handle those cases, and they should be the ones handling them, not my office. And these firms cannot specialize in all of these different areas. So, yes, exclusively mesothelioma.
And something else, um, Michael, is sad to say your clients are dealing with a health issue that they will not survive. It takes a certain type of person.
It does, because you never know when you're going to get a phone call from a family member of a client letting you know that you've spoken to your client for the last time and that they've expired. And so it is something that you never get used to. And that is, truthfully, why when my clients call, one of the first things I always tell them is it's good to hear your voice. It's
Yes.
good to hear your voice because you don't know when you will never hear their voice again. So, um, yeah, unfortunately, mesothelioma is terminal 100% of the time. Nobody survives. You only extend your life, but the average life expectancy once somebody's diagnosed with mesothelioma is maybe 6 months, 9 months. Lung cancer, 2.5 years. And with asbestosis, which is also a terminal disease, well, it's not a cancer growing around the lung, it's like a spider web, just growing and slowly suffocating the lungs. And in those situations, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 15 years, but those 15 years, they're impaired. they can't breathe. Every
Mm.
time they go upstairs, every time they walk to the bathroom, walk to the kitchen, they notice it. And it's unfortunate. And, that's why we recognize it and we really try and help them. Something you may also, and you usually do touch on it, Steve, because you're pretty passionate as well. And that is, most of our clients, they're not from wealthy backgrounds. They're not white collar workers. Typically, asbestos was used in primarily blue collar settings, construction, shipyards, refineries, power plants, any type of hospital, school construction. And these are blue collar workers, never people, or not typically people who are from any, um, you know, uh, they're not high wealth individuals
Right.
typically. They're usually from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and they really need our help. And that's also one of the reasons why all cases are on a contingency. We've never sent out a bill in 30 years. That's not serving these clients. Knowing that they may get a bill from these lawyers and not have a case, that is something that all of these clients fear. And so we never want that to happen.
Michael, you do so much work before you even realize, and if you do, your first dime. And that's why your passion for this really stands out.
Yeah, some of these cases, it may be 2, 3 years, an incredible amount of expense before we see any real compensation. But for clients, within all ethical guidelines, we're not representing them unless we think there's going to be success at the end of the road. And a lot of these clients may need some money to help them cover medical bills. And in cases, quite often, we may have to advance clients' money during that process as well. So not only are we paying for these very expensive cases and claims that we're filing on their behalf, but we're also oftentimes putting out money to assist them in their if it's medical care or really um, health, safety, and welfare needs. We will assist them with advances on their settlements as well. And anything we can do to help these people and let them know there is hope. There's hope at the end of the line.
I want to get to the letters. There's so many of them. And I know it's really, I was looking at the first 6, 7, 8 letters. They're all cities that are on the water. Does that surprise you?
Not at all, since we've mentioned it, a couple of times in these podcasts, Steve. When you've got cities on the water, it's quite often that you're going to find shipyards.
Mm.
And like, I'm located in the Bay Area. We had two major naval shipyards, Mare Island Naval Shipyard, Hunters Point Naval Shipyard. And, as I learned over the 30 years, every naval shipyard, of course, major one is on the coast, whether it's in Bath, Maine, Bremerton, Washington, Texas. There's a lot, as well as private shipyards as well. So it doesn't surprise me at all, because every naval ship built before 1980, as well as any other uh, ocean going vessel, would have had asbestos on it. Navy ships were incredibly loaded with them, whether it was the boiler rooms and the insulation and the refractory materials, the fireproofing, the blankets, the welding, the gaskets, the packing, the flooring. It just was never ending. But it's also, oftentimes the same with private ships, whether it was private ship owners such as Chevron or Exxon or Shell. All of their ships had asbestos in them, also on the coast. So it never surprises me when we get contacted with people on the coast. When you also have such, large shipping activity, you're typically going to have oftentimes refineries, if possible, near the coast so they can ship their oil. So then there's tons of asbestos in the refineries. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of cases throughout, the Midwest and the center of the country, central US, but it's the coast where these cases predominantly started and continue to have the most diagnoses on the coast.
Why is it different now with shipbuilding now versus back then?
Well, it's sort of unfortunate what's happened to our shipbuilding industry. It's not that well, they now have suitable replacements for asbestos, and they
Mm,
had them previously, but they were just more expensive. But if you look at the shipbuilding industry as a whole in the United States, I think we maybe have one or two major Navy shipbuilding yards, Newport News, I believe, in Virginia, where there used to be like four or five. It's one of the things I actually was recently reading, and China has surpassed us um, fivefold in
yes.
shipbuilding, and I think that's something that the new administration has made one of their goals to reinvigorate the shipbuilding in the United States. Not a lot has really changed. Clearly, asbestos isn't used as much anymore, but our shipbuilding industry is probably 5% of what it once was. And that's throughout the US.
Okay, we're going to start off with Craig in Baltimore. Uh, what are the different compensation options available for mesothelioma patients?
Lots, lots. And again, it depends. Okay, so let's start with the biggest: suing solvent defendants, going to court, filing a lawsuit. Okay, that's the biggest one. Okay, say for example, you were exposed to General Electric turbines, Westinghouse boilers. Maybe it's Johnson and Johnson talc, for example, it's baby powder, and you've got mesothelioma. By far the largest, typically, method of compensation would be filing a lawsuit in superior court and litigating against those defendants in hopes of either getting a verdict or a settlement. Most of the cases settle, and let's just say, on average, if you've got mesothelioma, age 75, have some decent exposures to asbestos, let's say maybe you're looking at average about, excuse me, 3 or 4 million dollars on average. Could be more, could be less, from solvent defendants. Second source of compensation: asbestos trust funds. Depending on what asbestos products somebody was exposed to, these claims could be as valuable as, say, $1 million. Used to be a
Wow.
lot more before these funds got raided by lawyers. Not me, of course, but other lawyers in my field who also run the trust, but maybe as high as $1 million if you've got mesothelioma and you were exposed to some of the most valuable companies who have trust funds, their products. So that's the second source of compensation. Third, of course, completely separate, something we don't even handle, would be a workman's comp claim
Mm,
against your employer. Say you were employed at uh, 3M, for example. Chevron oil refinery. You can't sue your employer. That would be what's known as a workman's comp case. When I talked about the most, and maybe one or two jurisdictions you can, I think maybe Pennsylvania, you can sue your employer, but that's one of the only ones. Every other jurisdiction, that's a workman's comp case. Those cases, I don't know what they typically settle for, but let's just figure maybe $250,000 there. And then if you were in the military and you were exposed, for example, in the Navy, you would also have a VA disability claim. And I don't know exactly what those claims pay either, but that's usually a monthly award or a monthly stipend of like $2,500 a month, $3,000 a month, in addition to any other military benefits for the rest of your life. So there's multiple sources of compensation, Craig, from Baltimore. Um, and we try and access every single one, within the confines of the law. Within the confines of the law, we try and access every single one.
Craig just did a follow-up question. It's a good question. He said, I heard that you said that most of your cases end up in a settlement. How do you know when you've gotten every dime out of them and there's probably no more money there? That's kind of a good question.
It's not a good question. It's sort of a great question. I think that's something that sort of drives me, and I feel like it should drive lawyers in all their cases, and that is, have you done the best that you can for your client? Have you gotten all the money out of these cases? When I mentioned, you know, earlier about these firms that handle, dozens or literally hundreds of mesothelioma cases, those are the types of cases where I am almost certain that there is millions of dollars left on the table for their
Oh, no.
clients in every case, because it is impossible to really properly work up these cases. Um, that meant it's impossible to work up that many cases to understand how all of those clients each year, how they were exposed to asbestos and all of the products they were exposed to. Because one, we're still discovering new exposures even today. Like we've mentioned in the past, the Johnson and Johnson's baby exposure,
Yes.
cosmetics, which had, like women's cosmetics who had talc in them. So you get a lot of hairdressers and barbers. And so we're learning new exposures. I guess the best way that I try and personally handle that is I never close my cases. I don't tell a client, hey, your case is now closed. Um, there's no more money for you. We're closing your file. Even if we've gotten them $10 million, we're not closing that case for a couple of reasons. One, we may discover some new exposures within the statute of limitations. Or two, some of the claims that we file may pay these clients additional money. I guess, it is probably one of the best questions that I've been asked and one of the most difficult ones. And the answer, I think the best answer is we don't know. We don't know. But if I feel like if you have, as a lawyer, if you able to give your best effort into each case to try and determine each and every exposure that they had. And the reason that I say that is, the experts, and I'm not a medical expert or a doctor, but the experts in these trials will say that every significant um, we will use significant exposure contributed to the disease. But how would you define significant? How do you define that? Is a
Yes.
week of exposure where someone's exposed to 10 million asbestos fibers grinding gaskets? Is that significant? Or does it have to be 2 years of exposure working at a shipyard? And that's a question that the jury has to answer in these cases. What is significant? But as a lawyer working up these cases, I look at it as every exposure is significant because that's another possible exposure that can get my client compensated. Where I've seen many of these larger firms, for example, they'll have somebody who was in the Navy for a year and they'll ignore that exposure because maybe they worked construction for 5 years and they figure, hey, we can get them money from the construction work. Still there?
Yes.
Yes, you were
Oh,
on money
good.
from the construction work.
Sorry, one more time.
You were on money from the construction work?
Oh, I apologize. We may be able to get them money from the construction work as well as money from their time in the Navy that these other firms ignored. Significant money. But these other firms just see the big exposure when what the experts say is even a week of exposure, even maybe 2 days of exposure. If you're exposed for 8 hours a day, that's 16 hours. Could be 10 million asbestos fibers at least you're exposed to. So we consider every exposure significant. And thank you for that. Sorry about that. There was
That's
a
okay.
call had come in. And
You know what, Michael? Also, I think you're leaving one important thing out. Your experience. You've been doing this for over 30 years. You must have a feel for every case.
You know, that, of course, yes. And not only a feel, but what we've also done is kept a database so that anytime a client, anytime we get records on a Navy ship, for example, anytime we get records on a refinery, anytime we get the state of uh, Alabama's records of where all their boilers are, and what their locations are and who made them. We have saved all of this information and put it into a database so that we've not only do we get a feel or an instinctive feel of where somebody was exposed, but we can also run all of their sites, locations, ships, shipyards, power plants. We can run them all, any site in the United States, schools, hospitals, you name it. We can run them through our database, and it'll also tell us whether or not they had asbestos at that location, who made it, what type of asbestos, was it in the drywall, the fireproofing, all of those details we've got.
We're getting a lot of people want to know what should I look for if I think maybe I have asbestos or mesothelioma. Can you tell us? Because one of them said, uh, sometimes I think I might have COPD. And I guess they go to a pulmonologist. Is that right?
That exactly. And you know, I'm glad you mentioned COPD. 99% of pulmonologists that I have encountered, when somebody walks in to a pulmonologist and says, I have a breathing problem, the first question that pulmonologist will ask is, have you ever smoked cigarettes in your life?
Mm.
The first question isn't, were you ever around asbestos? What do you think may have caused this? The first thing 99.9 want to point to is smoking cigarettes. and which typically leads to a diagnosis of COPD. I can't tell you how many people have come to me where their medical records said COPD, and we sent it off to our doctor, and we sent their CT scan or X-ray, which is what this what this questionnaire, this individual would need to do, would be to go get a CT scan or a chest X-ray and send it off to somebody like us, where we can send it to somebody who's trained in identifying
Mm,
asbestos diseases. I am certain that most local pulmonologists do not have, have not been literally trained, licensed, and certified in identifying asbestos related diseases. Yes, they are licensed pulmonologists, but I can tell you that these pulmonologists, 99% of the time, if somebody walks in and says, I've got a breathing problem, they may give them a CT scan or a chest x ray, but the first thing they will typically point to is smoking. Now, I
mm,
will say for this individual, there's another test that pulmonologists very frequently do. It is known as a PFT, or a pulmonary function test. It is where you just breathe into a tube and walk on a treadmill. There are scores which a pulmonologist should be able to identify. I can now identify from those pulmonary function tests, because one of these doctors trained me in identifying which score will show you whether it is more likely smoking or asbestos that caused this individual's problems. But understand, there's really three different breathing problems I've often seen when somebody's got a breathing disease. Could be asbestosis, could be caused by asbestos, could be COPD caused by smoking, chemicals, fumes, or it may have some unknown causes even if the person didn't smoke. And then there's also a very serious terminal disease known as silicosis, which manifests very similarly to asbestos, but this is one that is caused by sand typically,
mm.
or quartz. We did see them in the shipyard cases because there was a lot of sand blasting of ships. But now you are, and I think because there's been some recent verdicts around the country, you will start seeing a lot of these silicosis ads and silicosis cases for quartz countertops, which were loaded with sand or this type of hazardous silica that was used in countertops. And individuals who cut countertops are very susceptible to silicosis. And so that is the third disease. And that's why you may start seeing a lot of commercials, because very recently there was some very large verdicts around the country for these cases. And naturally, a lot of firms that handle mesothelioma cases, not mine, immediately are jumping into these silicosis cases too. Um, so great question though as well. Go in, get a chest x-ray or a CT scan and a breathing test, a PFT from a pulmonologist. If you have any questions about the diagnosis, and you've had, especially if you've had a lot of exposure to asbestos, you can send them to my office. We'll send them off to the doctor. You'll never see a bill from us.
Any other kind of symptoms besides breathing, Michael?
Sure. A lot of, chest pain, pain in the
Mm,
abdomen, under the lungs quite often. You will see, and it is often accompanied by breathing. The big one we see, which is also very frequently accompanied by breathing issues, is somebody goes in, and this is one we often see with mesothelioma, is they go in and they've got breathing issues, um, and what they run a chest x-ray or a CT scan, and they see that fluid has built up in the lining of the lung, and that's what's causing difficulty in breathing, the lungs expanding. And so they have to go in with a needle and drain that fluid, which usually eases the symptoms. However, that is one of the really early warning signs that we see in mesotheliomas is it is breathing problems, but also fluid buildup in the lungs. Other signs also related to breathing, walking upstairs and just noticing, hey, it's gotten real. This is something I've heard from clients for 30 years. It's gotten real difficult to catch my breath. And I don't mean about, we've all gotten old and maybe gained a few pounds or something, but I'm talking about real difficulty catching your breath and walking uphill. That's another one. These are good questions, but since asbestos really does typically affect the lungs, that's the usual warning signs would be the breathing, the pain under the rib cage, the fluid buildup in the lungs, and just general malaise, not feeling yourself, that something's going on.
Jackson in San Diego wants to know, do I have to file a lawsuit to get a mesothelioma settlement?
You do not.
Wow.
We can still get you probably $1 million without filing a lawsuit and never
Wow.
going to court. But what these, victims of mesothelioma need to understand is, by filing a lawsuit, it's many millions more in compensation that they will receive. One. Two, when a client files when we file a mesothelioma case on behalf of a client, we always recognize, hey, this guy's got mesothelioma. They can't be running around to court and depositions and signing things all the time and taking phone calls. And, they've got to deal with their treatment. There is very limited involvement by a client in, let's just say, from start to finish. A mesothelioma case takes a year. Out of that year, there is probably a 1 week time period where we really need the client, and that is the deposition. Other than that, the client may not hear from us for a week or two or three, if we're working on the case, or if they may get stuff in the mail and things to sign. But we always recognize that our clients don't have the energy, don't want to make the effort to be involved. And if they don't want a lawsuit, of course, we're never filing a lawsuit on their behalf. And they can still get significant compensation, significant, without ever filing a lawsuit.
But do they leave money on the table by doing that, Michael?
Of course, they do, Stephen, millions of dollars. But, clients are from low socioeconomic backgrounds,
Yes.
and, $1 million maybe means as much as $4 million to these people. And that's fine. For the law firm, if we make less money, that's fine. On some asbestosis cases, we probably lose money on that case with all the monies that we spend. But it's okay. It's okay. It's the client's decision. And if the client's happy, then we're happy.
It's amazing, Michael. When we first started this, I went, God, are there enough questions in a 25-minute show? And I was blown away. There was, we extended it to 50 minutes, and I see why. Because I mean, I've got so many letters here. Uh, it's easily a 50-minute show. Uh, Next question is from John in Oakland. Wants to know is mesothelioma is more commonly diagnosed in white and Hispanic Latino people than in African American or Asian Americans? There's a demographic question for you.
Well, I don't have any statistics on that, Stephen, but I will tell you a little story. And I mentioned earlier that, you know, asbestos was often used in blue collar settings. And oftentimes in blue collar settings, you see people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, which includes individuals from all races, oftentimes. And there was a story that was once told to me by a client who had mesothelioma. I remember him. His name was Charlie Wheeler, and he was Caucasian. He was white, and he worked in the refineries. And at that time, the jobs, like the more skilled positions, insulators, pipe fitters, were given to the white people, and the lower level jobs, like the labor jobs, were given to the blacks or the African American people. And so he was an insulator, and they used to, at that, in that era, and it was unfortunate, they would make fun of the black people and, the laborers. And he would tell me a story. They would make fun of them because they would tie wet rags around their faces when they were sweeping up and cleaning up the refinery after an overhaul, which involved a ton of asbestos. And they would call them names like wimp, and that name that starts with a P, which I won't
Mm,
say on the air,
I know.
for working in the refinery and having to put these wet cloths around their faces. And
Mm,
what he told me was, interestingly enough, it was him and all the white insulators who got sick, and it was these African Americans who oftentimes didn't get sick because they were smart enough to put these wet rags around their faces. That doesn't necessarily answer your questions, but I think asbestos, um, let's just say asbestos disease isn't a racist in any way. It'll hit all races. We've had clients of all socioeconomic backgrounds, Muslims, Hispanics. Like now we represent a lot of Hispanics because we represent a lot of people who worked in asbestos mines in Arizona.
mm.
And 90% of the people working, or maybe even 95, were Hispanics. So in that case, it's almost all Hispanics coming out of the mine. I think the best answer is no. You are not more susceptible. I think in the old days you would have been more likely, maybe based on the type of work that you did, more grunt work, more sweeping, more exposure. But I don't even know that that's the case. So it hits anybody and everybody.
Um, Boy, this has got to be a popular show. We're getting people are writing us to put them on the Discord so they know, well, your show's come on. That's a nice compliment. Hey, Michael, what about statute of limitations? A person passes away. Is there a statute of limitations there that
Well,
they can
there
file
is
a lawsuit?
there's oftentimes a statute of limitations both at a time of diagnosis. So if someone goes in and gets diagnosed with mesothelioma, their statute of limitations typically starts to run on a personal injury case California, it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, state to state. Some are as short as 1 year, some may be as long as 5 years from diagnosis. And then, same thing, a statute of limitations on wrongful death cases as well. They vary from state to state. We always want to get a case on file within a year of the time somebody passes away. The shortest statute of limitations for wrongful death cases are 1 year. Can we still get them money? Say somebody died of mesothelioma, the family is absolutely traumatized. They don't want to deal with lawyers. 2 years later, they call us and say, hey, my grandfather passed away from mesothelioma 2 years ago. Is there anything you can do? Well, the first thing we'll do is research all of the places they were exposed. Even if I'm in California and they're in California, maybe they were in the Navy and exposed to asbestos in a state that has a 2 or 3 year statute of limitations. A lot of the trust funds that we file allow you to file 3 years from diagnosis. So even if somebody contacts us and a statute of limitations may appear blown on at first blush, there are often ways we can get around those. They do apply. Think the shortest are 1 year, the longest are maybe 5 or 6 years.
I guess what I hope people have learned is you might have a case and not know it. And it doesn't hurt to pick up the phone and call Michael. We're running his phone number and his website. But for all of you who are listening on radio, Spotify, Michael, how do people reach you?
Our call center is at 1-800-970-DUST, DUST. I also like to give out my direct line mobile phone number. Any listeners, call me up, 415, or text me, 415-307-2119. And our office phone number, 415-895-5175. Our website is at mesothelioma.pro. You can always contact me there as well. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me soon on YouTube and Instagram as well. But of course, on Ask the Experts every month, I'll be here.
Michael, I so appreciate your knowledge and actually the way you share your knowledge. Michael will be back again with us next month. Michael, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Goes too quick, Steve. Have a great day. Thanks again.
I know. Take care, Michael. Hey, that's attorney Michael Mandelbrot. Folks, listen, if it comes to mesothelioma or asbestos, he's the best. He is the best, and you will be so satisfied with him. That's going to do it for us today. We'll be back in with you next week with more Ask the Experts.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Experts show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.